Elder abuse, how to spot it and how to prevent it. Next on Smart Money. Welcome to Smart Money. I'm Pat Boyle along with my co-host Julia Anderson, and we're happy to welcome back Ellen Clem, who is Head of Outreach and Education for the Oregon Attorney General's Office. You've been with us before, Ellen. We're so glad to have you back and talk about elder abuse.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. You had a lot to say, so we promised to have you back, and now we're doing that. And we want to focus today on elder abuse when it comes to money. Anything change in the past 2 years since COVID turned things basically upside down in our world?
My goodness, that is a very large question. I could probably talk for about 2 hours with respect to all the things that changed for older adults in our state as a result of COVID. Perhaps the most concerning thing that changed for me is suddenly we had a population of folks that were really not always out and about to begin with. You know, older adults, they don't go to school every day. A lot of them are retired, and so they aren't as visible among the community like some other populations, say, you know, first graders at an elementary school, for example, who go to school every day, have to see the doctor frequently for a number of things. And so from my perspective, the most concerning thing that happened to our older folks was that really social isolation. And many of us relied on technology to stay in touch with friends and family. And that was a challenge for older adults. They don't have the tech skills. Many of them don't have the tech skills that you and I and the younger generation of Oregonians has. And it unfortunately made them ripe and very solid victims, potential victims for fraud, scams, and elder financial exploitation.
So elderly folks then, it sounds to me like, are sitting ducks for elder abuse, financial abuse particularly, more than ever. And so the question is, are you getting more calls on the abuse hotline, or what's the trend there?
You know, we have a consumer hotline at the Oregon Attorney General's Office, and we receive upwards of, depending on the year, anywhere between 35,000 to 55,000 calls every year about, you know, concerns related to financial fraud, scams, etc. A vast majority of those number of calls are from older adults. And then we also have in our state a separate adult abuse reporting hotline. I'm not sure if the calls to that particular hotline went up, stayed the same, etc. The Oregon Attorney General's Office doesn't run or manage that particular hotline. But I think it's important to remember that just because folks aren't calling to complain doesn't mean that it isn't happening. And I think those are the cases that I worry about the most. The people who don't even necessarily know that they've been financially abused or know that they've been a victim of a fraud or a scam. Those are the people that I worry about. And so it's easy to talk about, you know, oh, the calls went up or the calls went down or the calls stayed the same. But the reality is that the concerns that we have, those of us who work in this field, are elevated this year. We are more than ever concerned that these older adults who've been socially isolated for months and months on end are victimized. And this is just sort of the beginning of what I anticipate will be a long and difficult sort of awakening as we start to dig through and uncover some of these individuals who've been victimized during this time.
Yeah, I think the sad thing too, it's not just an email or a phone call scam. It could be grown kids coming back and mooching off mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. How widespread is that, do you think?
Those calls and situations are very, unfortunately, very common. We know that nationally, statistics show that older adult children, oftentimes male children with typically some sort of addiction, gambling, alcohol, etc., they can often be perpetrators of financial abuse, typically towards a female, their mother. And those situations are very, very heartbreaking. There are a lot of family dynamics involved, and just really, really challenging for everyone involved.
So I've done a lot of research and writing about elder financial abuse. It's one of my issues. So, and I think I know this, and help me bring me up to date on this, but reverse mortgages can be a financial abuse issue. Isn't that right? When kids help the parents tap their equity?
We can see a number of things with respect to reverse mortgages. We can have predatory companies that target older adults and sell them products like reverse mortgages that maybe aren't appropriate for an older adult. We certainly have situations that we've seen over the years with respect to children forging signatures of parents to obtain a reverse mortgage, pressuring an older adult or parent into getting a reverse mortgage and using that money exclusively for the benefit of the son or the daughter, or whomever it may be. So red flags kind of go up in my mind whenever I hear about a situation that involves a reverse mortgage. It's not a product or a decision that everyone should pursue. I think that if that is something that you're interested in looking into, you should do so very, very carefully and make sure that it's the right product for you, the right situation for you, and proceed cautiously. That's what I always tell people about those types of decisions involving, your greatest asset, your home.
Who would you say is most often behind financial elder abuse?
The perpetrators of elder abuse?
Yeah.
It oftentimes, unfortunately, can be family members, which is really disappointing and sad to hear, or individuals who have some sort of relationship with the older adult. Certainly, as the Director of Consumer Outreach and Education, I work very closely with our Elder Abuse Unit at the Department of Justice. I also work very closely with our Consumer Protection Unit. So I hear stories of all kinds and types of perpetrators. The so-called Nigerian prince who contacts an older adult on the phone and says they've won, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That could be one situation. And then, as we discussed earlier, an alcoholic son who lives in mom's basement and has pressured her into getting a reverse mortgage and is using that money exclusively for his benefit. The number and type of perpetrators of this type of crime are varied and just kind of all over the map at times.
Ellen, can you make a report to the hotline without anyone knowing that you've done it? Can you be anonymous if you report something you think is elder financial abuse?
That is a great question, and the answer is absolutely you can. So Oregon law has a number of mandatory reporters listed or laid out by profession. There's approximately maybe between 44 and 50 types of professions that are mandatory reporters. Attorneys are on that list, chiropractors. There's a wide range of folks that are on that list. And I spend a lot of time going around the state virtually and physically educating those professions to help them understand their mandatory duty to report. And one of the things we talk extensively about is not only do you have this obligation to report, but kind of here's the way that you can make that report. And anybody can make an anonymous report. I will say that it's helpful if you do leave your name and contact information, because oftentimes the individual or individuals that are investigating this report, they have follow-up questions. And if they don't know who made the report or how to get in touch with the individual who made the report, that can be very frustrating from an investigative standpoint. And so I do encourage people, of course, to make the report. If they want to make it anonymously, that is their right. But I would encourage folks to leave some information like a name and a phone number behind. And then I like to remind people that all of these reports are confidential and they cannot be disclosed without a judge's order. So there's no concern that, say, your name or contact information is going to end up in the hands of the alleged perpetrator or on the front page of the Oregonian. It's all confidential information.
Julia earlier used the term sitting duck for elders who face financial elder abuse. Is there anything proactively that baby boomers aging into the 70s and 80s can do to prevent themselves from becoming victims?
Oh my goodness. So many things. I think the first thing to do is kind of realize or recognize that older adults are targeted because, much like who's the famous bank robber who, when they asked him why he robbed banks, he said, well, that's where the money is. And that's the same situation with older adults. Older adults in the United States control the vast majority of the wealth. Scammers and others who want to financially abuse older adults know this. And so that makes them the perfect target for, a fraud or an abusive crime like financial exploitation. So I think the first thing I would tell older adults is recognize that you are a target. Just know that and, sort of proceed with every transaction or sharing of information with that in mind. The Oregon Department of Justice has a number of resources available on our website, mostly aimed at consumer transactions, frauds, and scams. But we certainly have more detailed information available to Oregonians about how to, say, maybe get some assistance with, or information about, say, powers of attorney. That is one area of the law that we have seen some financial exploitation take place. So I would encourage people to visit our website, which is really easy to remember. It's just oregonconsumer.gov. Lots of great tips on that website about how to stay safe from frauds, scams, and financial elder abuse.
There's something that's happened in the last few years that I think you would applaud, and that's that the banking industry has gotten a lot more savvy about spotting financial abuse. Everything from the son in the basement taking the ATM card and tapping out money out of the mother's checking account, other strange things where they may bring the parent in and want cash out of a checking account. So banks are getting a lot better about raising the alarm on some of this behavior, which I think is really good. And you mentioned power of attorney. That's another thing where lawyers and others are becoming much more aware of financial abuse of the elderly. So I won't spend a lot more time on that, but that's another area where I think people are becoming a lot more sensitive about this whole issue. And we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah, I would just say that earlier you were asking me about the perpetrators of financial fraud against older adults. And I would just say that, I mentioned that it was a wide variety of perpetrators, but we do know some things about the complaints that have been reported to the DHS hotline over the years. And one of the things we know exactly supports what you said. That is that banks are the number one reporter of financial exploitation against older adults. And that is, to their credit, they're not bank tellers, and bank employees are not mandatory reporters. So they are doing a great job, and I applaud them in their efforts. We've joined with them a number of times to do education and let folks know that if an older adult comes in and wants to wire, say, $5,000 to a grandson who's in jail in Mexico, it's probably a scam. And then, as you mentioned, an older adult who comes in with a son who wants to withdraw $50,000 in cash. Those types of red flags, the tellers and the staff at the banks have been great and are very knowledgeable thanks to this partnership that we have with them, and are really helping us keep older adults safe in the state of Oregon.
Well, Ellen, thank you for talking with us today. She is Ellen Clem, Director of Outreach and Education for the Oregon Attorney General's Office. You've been watching Smart Money.
For more information, go to my website at 60andsingle.com.